Hi, my name is Kel and I'm a therapist and educator with a special interest in eating disorders. Come on in, take a seat, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe for bite-sized content across the mental health and eating disorders spectrum. In today's video, I'd like to talk to you a little about adults and eating disorders. I recently posted a video about how common eating disorders are. If you missed that, you can click somewhere up here to go and watch that video first. In that video, I talked a little about the prevalence in childhood, adolescence and adulthood in relation to eating disorders. And in the comments section, somebody asked a great question, which was around whether all of those adults with eating disorders first developed them in childhood or adolescence. This is a particularly well-timed question because BEAT, the UK Eating Disorder Charity, and King's College London actually recently conducted a large-scale study. They had around 9,000 participants in which they looked at age of onset of eating disorder. And what their research seems to show is that a little over half of adults with eating disorders started to display signs and symptoms over the age of 18. This is interesting and also slightly concerning in so much as a lot of the focus in the realm of eating disorders is on children and adolescents. This is true when it comes for funding for services, research and availability of different types of therapy. This is also true when it comes to general awareness raising. It seems we need to focus more on what the experience of adults with eating disorders might be in terms of better understanding that from a research perspective, and also in terms of offering more services for adults with eating disorders. I actually tend to mostly myself work with adults with eating disorders. I do work with adolescents, but the vast majority of my clients tend to be in adulthood. And I've noticed that they tend to fall into one of four groups. I don't mean groups in terms of diagnosis, I mean groups in terms of onset and their pathway into treatment, or in my instance, therapy with myself. I want to try and break this down a little bit for you because I suppose I'm wondering if by breaking it down like this, we will give ourselves the opportunity to group adults with eating disorders sufficiently to explore and research their different experiences. So the first group of adults with eating disorders that I see are those that have the onset of their eating disorder over the age of 18. There is actually no reason why only children and adolescents would develop eating disorders. Eating disorders are coping mechanisms, they're mental health struggles. They do not discriminate based on gender, based on class, based on ethnicity, nor based on age. So children, adolescents and adults of all ages do develop eating disorders. Yes, many of the triggers that we might see as contributing to eating disorders present in adolescents, but so do they in adults. Many things trigger people's eating disorders. It varies grossly from individual to individual, and some people don't even know specifically why they develop an eating disorder, and is considered to be a significant genetic component involved there. But some of the factors in adulthood could be pregnancy, could be body changes, could be relationship difficulties, including relationship breakdown, could be struggling with gender or sexuality, could be career or financial difficulties. The reasons really are endless, and we unfortunately all bump into some of those life experiences in adulthood, and for some individuals that might contribute to or trigger them into an eating disorder. The second group we have is individuals who are adults with eating disorders who were diagnosed with their eating disorder during childhood or adolescence and who accessed services and experienced full recovery. Unfortunately, some of those individuals might later in life relapse into their eating disorder. We know that relapses in eating disorder recovery aren't uncommon, and so although a person may have had many years or decades of recovery, in some instances a number of individuals might relapse later in life and access eating disorder services or therapy with myself at that point. Some things that often trigger relapses are around significant body changes. So in women, that might be factors such as pregnancy or that post-pregnancy period, or it could also be menopause. But we could also see any of those factors I mentioned just a moment ago as being the reason for a relapse as well. Thirdly, we have those adults with eating disorders who develop their eating disorders during childhood and adolescence, who accessed services and entered partial recovery. This means that they saw an improvement or maybe even a significant improvement in their signs or symptoms. And I tend to meet those adults in their lives because they come to realise that their eating disorder is still impairing their life in some way and that they would like to continue to improve on the recovery that they have already achieved. Then lastly, the fourth group is those individuals who developed eating disorders during childhood and adolescence, but who for whatever reason didn't access care, treatment, eating disorder services during that time. This could be for many reasons, but just to name a couple, it could be that they didn't understand that they had an eating disorder. It could be that they weren't able to access eating disorder services for some reason, or that they or their family chose not to. Now, this is just an observation that I've made, and it isn't something that I've kind of written down on paper and tried to research in relation to those clients that I've worked with who are adults with eating disorders. But it seems to me that the needs and the wishes of adults with eating disorders can vary dependent on which of those categories they fall under. Of course, those that have accessed care and support in the past are more likely to know what care and support they think will be helpful in this future moment, but is also factors in eating disorder experiences that are quite different in adulthood to in childhood and adolescence. Eating disorders can be devastating at any age, but children and adolescents with eating disorders tend to have a whole family unit around them to support them. They're able to access community adolescent mental health services and end up with an additional support network around them then, whereas adults do have more varied experiences. Of course, plenty of people do have great support networks around them, but also some individuals don't, and the availability of that support tends to fluctuate more around adults with eating disorders. I tend to also notice that the impact of an eating disorder in adulthood is felt in particular ways. So for example, individuals that want to have children show particular concerns around their children seeing their eating disorder behaviours, and often that is actually a reason for people accessing support at that point. Some people with eating disorders in adulthood find it hard to have a full-time job because, for example, their eating disorder behaviour might take up hours of their day, or they might feel exhausted because of the physical implications. Of course, this isn't true for everybody, and lots of adults with eating disorders also manage stoically to continue to plough through with their life and live full lives despite the chaos and the pain of their eating disorder. It can be quite challenging for adults with those full lives to find the time to access eating disorder care. If you're 13, 14, 16 years old and trying to access eating disorder services, the chances are with the support of your family and your school, you'll be able to easily fit in the appointments with the eating disorder service or with a private therapist that you need. But if you're trying to juggle eating disorder services and working and family life as an adult, that can be extra difficult. It can be a huge problem whereby people want to access help but really find it difficult to make that time to prioritise their needs. And I definitely see that as a factor in accessing care for adults with eating disorders. Another area to highlight here is in terms of the physical health of adults with eating disorders. The older we get, the longer and more challenging it is for our body to bounce back from the things that we experience in terms of illnesses. And that's true in terms of the physical implications of eating disorders as well. So we need to be asking questions around what the physical healthcare needs of adults with eating disorders are, and does that differ dependent on what stage, what age the adult is? because we absolutely don't want to see people with eating disorders dying as a direct result of their illness if it's preventable, which it absolutely should be. These are just some of my thoughts and my reflections that I have noticed in my time working with adults with eating disorders. I hope that on this channel I can continue to bring you information about research as it expands in terms of support, services and information, knowledge as it pertains to children, adolescents and also adults. If you've got particular questions about the adult experience with eating disorders that you want to leave down in the comment box, I will happily go through those questions and answer any of them if I can in future videos or in future blog posts. If you are an adult watching this video or are supporting somebody who you think might be having issues in relation to food, body image, weight, shape or size as an adult, I'd really encourage you to ask the question, access the support. Adults struggle with eating disorders just as much as children and adolescents do, and everybody is worthy of accessing care and support. Until next time, be kind, be curious, be yourself.